This episode contains sensitive content. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Culture Podcast, where we explore the fine line between belief and manipulation. Through honest conversations with survivors, experts, and investigators, we examine how high control groups shapes lives and how people reclaim them. I'm Derek, and I'm your host. Welcome to the Culture Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm excited to have Gisselle with me. She is a first-generation Latina, Gen Z graduate pursuing her Master of Public Administration and Public Policy at Arizona State University. Currently, she holds a Bachelor of Arts in Mass Communications and Media Studies from ASU. She was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, where she spent most of her childhood being trained to be a preacher, a role that came with an expectation of lifelong submission. As the religion teaches women to subject to male headship, prohibits voting and political advocacy, and actively discourages higher education. Leaving that community was the hardest decision of her life, but it was inseparable from a deeper conviction that the future being mapped out for her was never truly hers to begin with. Her academic path is inseparable from her personal story. She chose to study public administration and policy precisely because civic participation was something she grew up being forbidden from. Once again, I'm excited to have Gisselle on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I think that's amazing. I think right away, anyone that grew up a Jehovah's Witness knows that what you've already accomplished is a massive feat. So kudos to you. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, when we originally started talking online, that's a common bond that we share. You definitely are farther along than me, but I'm in second term. Going for a cultural anthropology degree with a minor in religious studies, with a goal of a master's in counseling. So long journey ahead, but I think it'll be worth it.
Yeah, it was definitely a journey to get where I'm at. But it's been a good journey.
Yeah. So that'll be no doubt a topic for our conversation today. And so I'm excited to hear your viewpoint on all that stuff. Now, I know for people just meeting you, how would you describe kind of who you are today and kind of where you put your energy into these days?
Yeah, well, first I just wanted to thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah.
I've been listening to your podcast for some time now. Listening to Abby's episode is really what inspired me to share my story because I don't know Abby directly, but my sister does, so I knew of her.
Yeah, Abby's great.
So just yeah. Thank you for having me on your podcast. About me today, it's been about 6 years since I've been out of the religion, and I feel like it was a lifetime ago. It feels so long ago, and now I have a completely different life. Nowadays, I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I am I'm in school, as I mentioned. I'm getting my master's degree in public administration, so most of my time now is just focused on school. I also work full time, so I'm a pretty busy person nowadays. I with school and working full time, that takes up a lot of my time. But when I'm not in school, when I'm not working, I like to go hiking. I like to be outdoors. I like to travel. I like to live my life to the fullest and try new
Yeah.
things. Um I feel like being a growing up Jehovah's Witness, your activities are like limited. So I just find myself doing new things. I recently, not that long ago, did like an acting class. I did improv.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I just try to do as much as I can. So yeah, that's more about me today.
It's interesting that you said improv because the episode that just recently came out, we're always a few months ahead on recordings to releases, but Jordan's episode just came out today as of recording. And we were also talking about improv classes to be kind of an exciting, terrifying thing to do.
So scary. Yeah, it's different from preaching. It's different from preaching.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a whole different, kind of lane of what you're going through, but I think for anyone that wants to do that, my opinion on that is that's probably the best way to do it because there's not necessarily a script, but you are getting up there, you are performing, but it's a little more free flow.
Yeah.
But yeah, still kind of nerve-wracking. Um, so before we kinda start, was there anything else you wanted to kinda talk about before we begin kinda diving into your story?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly mention why I'm speaking out now. I started basically posting little videos on shorter videos on TikTok, and I've had a few people tell me, why are you starting to talk about this now after 6 years of leaving? And one of the reasons why I decided to start talking about my story now is I feel like there's always been a lot of XJW content, but a lot of it has been like when I first left, I didn't see a lot of women in the space.
Mhm.
And I think in recent years, there's been a lot more women sharing their stories. So I think just in the last year, I've been watching a lot of XJW content from women. So like at home and from Alyssa, or at home with Alyssa, I watch her, Bethany, and a couple other people. So
Oh,
I think that
Leger?
really, yeah, the shit, yeah, and that really inspired me to just finally share my story. So
I
I'm
love it.
excited to be here today. So that's all I wanted to mention.
I agree with you. I want your take too on what are your thoughts on my thought for this podcast was even though kind of we're XJW, so that's naturally gonna be a lot of people on here that gravitate towards it, but, any high control group, any cult, any environment, is I wanna talk with everyone, to be honest. But I'm curious your take on what XJW content has looked like for you.
Oh, wow, that's a good question. So XJW content, I think, has gotten a lot better. I think the problem with it before, because I'm Gen Z, so when I first left, I was 19. I was really young, and I started watching. That's kind of what helped me wake up, right? I used to watch a lot of more doctrine based XJW content where they would break things down. I know Lloyd Evans, and then there's another one, JT. He's a popular one. I liked him. Him and his wife do content together. I also think that a lot of the content back then was more, like I said, more male dominated. Um, there wasn't a lot of diversity within
Yeah,
the content, right? So it was mostly men. A lot of them were white. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think that that's a certain demographic. So sometimes I just couldn't really relate to a lot of
sure.
um, the content they were putting out, especially because every story is so unique, right? We might belong to the same religion, like you said. We might all be ex Jehovah's Witnesses, but even being Latina and being XJW is a different experience, right? Because there's a
Mhm.
lot of culture aspects, part of your culture that kind of gets suppressed. So within the recent years, I've really liked how this space has moved and how there's just a lot more diversity. There's a lot more women sharing their stories. There's a lot more people of color coming out to share their stories. There's a lot more Gen Z coming out to share their stories, which I didn't really see a lot of Gen Z people talking about it before. So that's kind of my experience with it.
I love it. Yeah, I think representation, is huge, and I think, having, multiple voices heard, from a kind of a different viewpoint is just amazing. I do agree with you about I don't know, my take is the initial stuff that I saw out there was just a lot of I don't know, a lot of anger, a lot of doctrinal things, a lot of updates, a lot of I don't know, just not having human conversations. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do when I started this podcast. It's never going to be a podcast about oh, Matthew 24:14 said this and oh my gosh, let's break down the original, Greek or whatever. Um, mine is like let's talk. So I'm happy to always talk with people and kind of learn from their viewpoint and kind of get an understanding of where they're coming from and just have voices out there. So I'm so thankful for you to be on and to have your unique individual voice. And I think yours is powerful based on what little I know so far, but just kind of even just where you've gotten it. I mean, it's such an accomplishment. I'm so happy for you and just excited to see where you go and your content. It's pretty great.
Thank you. I haven't had time to really post as much anymore, but I try to when
Yeah.
I can.
Yeah, I would rather have, less content than just pushing shit out there, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
It's like less, but when it's out, you're like, "Oh, this is amazing."
Hmm.
I know a lot of people get kinda caught into the algorithm, and it's like, "Oh, I'm a slave to the algorithm to make sure I'm getting views and this and that," but I don't know, deep down, I know that humanity is out there, and we're gonna find people that we relate to and just vibe with. So, all right. So, where to begin? I don't know. Early days. So, you grew up as a witness. What was life like early on for you, being raised as a Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah, so I did grow up in it. I was born and raised in it. Both of my parents converted when they were in their 20s and they met in the religion. I have three other siblings as well that were in it with we were together in it as a family. I have some extended family that were in it as well. But basically, I had a really typical Jehovah's Witness upbringing. Like just the regular going to service every weekend, going to the meetings 3 times a week, well, 2 times a week. And then back in the day, we had two meetings in person and then one meeting at our house. I don't know, it was called like the Bible study, I think.
Yeah, book study.
So that was a thing when I was the book study, yes. That was one thing that our family did. It was interesting because my father, he never was a an elder. He was a minister or servant at one point, but it was very brief. He got removed. I don't remember why he got removed, but he was removed from that. What do they call it? It's like a calling that you get. I don't know, but he was removed
Mm.
from that. But despite him not really being I guess what you would call a high-ranking Jehovah's Witness, my parents were very, very devout. They were very, very strict Jehovah's Witnesses. So very much by the book. Like they were not. I know some people have a more maybe open-minded upbringing in the religion or less strict, but I grew up the opposite. It was a very strict Jehovah's Witness upbringing. So
Why do you think that was the case? Was it something maybe about the community you're involved in, or do you have speculation? What do you think about that?
yeah, I think it was because of my culture. So my dad is Mexican, my mom is Guatemalan, and they're definitely more old school, right? They're boomers. And I think that their culture where they came from is it's just a lot more strict. Like the what is it called? Like just the culture that they have. It's just a lot more strict. There's more care in like what people think, how you should act, like what social norms you should do. And so I think that is why I had a really strict upbringing. I think it was also the main reason was the religion, but I also think my parents' culture is really conservative, right? A lot of Latinos are more conservative. A lot of them are Catholic, so I think that is the reason why.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's like it's from my viewpoint from a distance, it's like a lot more about the identity.
Hmm.
And I don't know, the more it's interesting too, the more you talk with people, they always say like Jehovah's Witnesses, worldwide brotherhood, we're all the same. No, you're
Hmm.
not. There's some people that are way more in than others.
I agree.
Uh, yeah. So what did that look like, having kind of that environment and a structure where it was a lot more involved?
So what that looked like for me was having a really isolated upbringing. Like and that's a pretty common as you know, that's a pretty common experience for a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, but growing up in that, you're not really. allowed to explore outside of your community. And it's a really confusing experience for a child because Jehovah's Witnesses are not isolated from the world, right? They're involved in the world. They go to public school. They're not like in a separate community in a compound away from society. You're still integrated in society, yet you're so alienated from it. And for me growing up, that just felt, it was such a weird upbringing to experience that because I felt like I was in the world. I felt like I was around other kids. I was around, other people, but yet I just felt so like an alien almost. I just felt so different from everyone else because I couldn't really relate to them. And I just felt so separated from the world. So there's a really interesting feeling of being in the world but not fully being in it.
Yeah, it's a weird dichotomy.
Exactly. It kind of feels like walking through life with a filter. And so, the typical upbringing, right? So I didn't celebrate any holidays. My parents were really strict. I wasn't allowed to be in sports. I wasn't allowed to be in clubs because that would take time away from the religion. So I didn't really have a chance to really have those years that a lot of kids have to develop who they are, right? They get to be in sports, they get to be in clubs, they get to really explore themselves and they get to make friends outside of their own community and networks. I was only ever allowed to have friends who were other Jehovah's Witnesses, and that's a really small pool of children. There's not a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses. So it really limits the amount of friends you can make as a kid. And so I wasn't really allowed to have friends outside of it. There wasn't that many kids in it. And Jehovah's Witnesses are so interesting because one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that Jehovah's Witnesses are Christian, right? And usually with Christianity, they encourage having families. It's very family
Mhm.
oriented. But Jehovah's Witnesses are the opposite, which I didn't realize until I left because I had no way to compare it.
Yeah.
Until I left, I started learning more about Christianity, and I was like, wow, despite identifying as Christian my whole life, being a Jehovah's Witness, the values are so different from modern Christianity. They're not family oriented. The religion itself isn't really focused on children. In fact, they discourage their members from having kids, and that's why growing up, there really wasn't, even though I grew up in the Spanish congregation, there wasn't that many kids, especially for Latinos, right? They usually have a lot of kids. But within my congregation, the maximum, I think my family was like the largest family. We had like
Mm,
my parents had 4 kids. And so within the Latino community, that's less common. Usually it's around 4 or 5 kids that they have.
yeah.
And that's not unheard of. It's not like a weird thing. But yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses don't have a lot of children. The religion discourages them from having kids because they think it's kind of like a waste of time, right? Because the end of the world is coming soon. So it's just a weird culture that they have where it's not focused on children. It's not really focused on the family. And so growing up, going to the meetings, a lot of the content that I listened to was ahead of my time, really. I was a little girl, and a lot of the talks are geared for adults. When you go to a Christian church, they have separate meetings for children. They have separate
Yeah, like Sunday school, like
activities like Sunday school, right? They have something for children. For Jehovah's Witnesses, it really is just literature that they make for children. They have like the children's books. That's as far as it goes. When you go to the meetings, you are listening to content that is made for adults. So growing up, I heard a lot of content that I feel like wasn't appropriate for my age range.
mhm.
A lot of fear-based content, the end of the world, often they would talk about sexual stuff, right? About sinning, fornication, pornography. And I was a kid. I was like, I didn't even know what that stuff was, but I learned about it through church. And usually those are conversations and things that you learn with your parents. But it's interesting that I was learning that firsthand, not from my parents, but I was learning that from the meetings. So yeah, it was definitely a really interesting experience for myself as a kid, but I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was like, there's so many threads to pull on there. I don't know, one thing that's interesting is is the thought of being Christian. And it's like the more I'm away from it, I don't really think that Jehovah's Witnesses are Christian.
Yeah.
Um, you know, they like we serve the governing body. We serve the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society and Jehovah. Um, and there's like I don't know, there's just a weird connection with like where's Jesus in this equation other than some great stories? I don't know, it's really interesting. And I think that the part that you said about like not having like community and especially as a child, it's really weird because I have memories of doing all these functions like barbecues and picnics. And so I know that those existed and I think that there was an attempt at community, but the farther I get away from it and look back at it, I always wondered why it fell off.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
And I don't have a definitive answer, but I think that because deep down people couldn't be their true authentic selves, they're kind of always performing. Trent and I on the podcast always talk about, people wearing masks a lot in this religion. And so you get invited to this barbecue and you're like, okay, we got to put on the mask. We're going out. We're a perfect family. We got to act a certain way, and then it's kind of exhausting and everyone's on the best behavior. And then they get home and they're like, "Oh, okay, now we can kind of be ourselves again." And sometimes, some of our ourselves are not very good people, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's I don't know, it's just I agree. I never felt truly connected to many people within the organization. So I got to a point as I got older where I was just like, I don't even want to go to these functions anymore.
Mhm.
And I was a believer. Was still in, but I was just like, it's just going to be so many fake people and it's exhausting and I don't want any part of it. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting childhood as well. Yeah, not having birthdays, being separate from the world, and it is kind of weird. Yeah, you got one foot in, one foot out. I'm thankful that my situation growing up wasn't as strict. My father didn't really keep an eye on me. He was too busy focusing on his endeavors. And so I know some people had a lot stricter environment, but yeah, it's really tough. And like you said, everyone has a different story. People that have listened to many episodes know my story, my family story for sure. But yeah, so you were in a Spanish congregation as well, so that's
Right.
kind of a unique experience. Was this a full congregation, or was it kind of like in the back room, like a smaller group?
It was a full congregation because I grew up in Maryville in Phoenix, and it's a neighborhood that mostly everyone there is Hispanic. They're all Latino. So almost all the congregations in that area were in Spanish. But what you were saying earlier about even though they're going back to what you were saying about the functions and how they didn't feel authentic, I 100% relate to that of what you were saying because when 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 I look back on my childhood, there was things that we did as a community. I'm not saying that we didn't have any moments like that, we did, but I completely agree that there was something always off about it. And what you said is that people wear a mask. And I think it's because Jehovah's Witnesses have such high standards. They have extremely unrealistic high standards of best life ever. That's their motto, best life ever. So you put on even if you're not doing well and you're having mental health problems, you have to pretend like you're not. It's always like wearing a mask and
And it's a tattletale culture.
exactly, it's a tattletale culture. There's a lot of surveillance within the religion, right? People watching each other, making sure they stay in line. But I also think that one thing that I find interesting is how they just care a lot about appearances as well. And that's something that I experienced a lot growing up. And I started to see that. And that kind of made me lose my faith a little bit when I was a kid because I could see the double standard as a child of the performativeness of it. And what I mean by that is there wasn't a lot of empathy growing up, like in it. And I'll give you one example. There was one experience I had. I was really young, and I grew up in a poor family. My family didn't have a lot of money. My parents are both immigrants, so they really had to, focus on other things like feeding their family. And there was one time we were preaching. It was winter, and in Arizona, the winters are not that bad, but it gets cold in the winter. It doesn't snow, but it's still cold, especially in the morning, early in the morning, right? When you're waking up to go preaching. There was one time where my mom didn't buy me leggings to go out, so I didn't have any leggings, and I was super cold. So I told her, "I'm really cold. I don't think I can go preaching because I'm too cold. I don't have leggings." And she told me, "It's fine. Just wear your pajamas underneath your skirt. You're wearing a long skirt. It doesn't matter. You're not gonna be able to see it because if your pajamas are underneath." So I was like, "Okay, fine." I was just listening to my mom, so I put my pajamas underneath my skirt. And when I was preaching, I got paired with a different Jehovah's Witness woman, and she noticed that I had my pajamas on under my skirt, and she looked at it and she's like, "Why are you wearing that?" And I was like, I think I was like 9 years old, and I said, "Oh, it's because I'm cold." And she said, "Oh, well, that doesn't look good." And she gave me a little talk about how we have to present ourselves in the way Jehovah wants us to present ourselves. And when we're preaching, we have to represent God. And representing God means being up to par with your appearances. So she said, "So if you're going to have to roll up your pajamas because we're preaching."
No way.
So I rolled up my pajamas all the way up and I preached the rest of the day. And I was shaking the whole time.
Ugh.
And that story is really important. I like to share it because it just shows how this person cared so much about the appearance. She cared so much about how we looked that she completely overlooked that a child was cold and came from a
Mhm.
family that couldn't afford proper clothing. And instead of having empathy, "Hey, let me buy this kid something," or "Hey, let's let it slide," or "You know what, let's have her go home because if she's not dressed appropriately," whatever the case is, none of that came to her mind or came to a concern because of how deeply it is ingrained for them to have this perfectionism mindset. So I kind of just wanted to mention that just to
Yeah.
share how much they care about appearances. And so that was something that really I struggled with because it was hard for me to, growing up, to really justify that because I also felt like, okay, well, I think God would be more empathetic. And I just saw how hypocritical it was, When you put off the mask, you have to be perfectionist and be the perfect family. And I didn't see that within my own family. My family was not perfect.
I'm curious about that story. Like that's pretty impactful at a young age. I'm curious how that wired you moving forward.
Yeah, well, it wired me to think that, well, to believe that nothing else mattered other than the image that we're trying to portray. And I think that created a really, really terrible environment for me as a young girl. Because what it taught me is that that's more important than a child being cold. Like, it's just such
Yeah.
a bad example. And I struggled a lot with that with my faith because at that point, most of the faith that I had was fear based. Oh, I don't want to die in Armageddon. I don't want to lose my family if I sin and get excommunicated. My faith was starting to feel not like faith, like I love God and this is a relationship that I have from God with God, but more fearing of staying in line and falling into that image that
Yeah.
Jehovah's Witnesses need to portray. Because if you don't portray that image, you're not really valued in the congregation, really. You're looked down upon. There's a lot of hierarchy in the religion, and you get treated differently. The goal is to do better, to be the better version of yourself, to always do more. And like I said, that was difficult because I feel like my family didn't always portray that. So within my own family, there was a lot of chaos. My father was pretty abusive growing up, and that was also difficult for me growing up because, at home, my life was very chaotic, but then I would have to go to the meetings and act like everything was okay. I would have
Mm.
to go preaching and knock on people's doors and basically tell them we're better. Like, my religion is better than yours. You need to convert, right? But it was weird because I didn't feel that deep down inside. I didn't really feel like I was better than these people because my own family wasn't really reflecting those values. And I think a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses growing up in it have that experience, right? There's a disconnect on what they say should be you're the best life ever, right? You are the one true religion. They call it the truth. There's a huge disconnect because for a lot of people in it, it doesn't feel like that at home in their everyday life.
When you were talking, it made me remember a story from my childhood. I'm the last of 8.
Wow, you have a big family.
Yeah, and 4 step family, but basically since I was 2 or 3 years old, they were part of my family. We had the big van, just had to pile everyone up in that thing. And I remember the story where you know, my father and my stepmother were just arguing, yelling in the van on the way to meeting, church, and just going at it. And there's just a sense of like, I don't know, just fear and uh, not safe. And we pull up to the Kingdom Hall, and it's just like, all right, now we're just, we're safe. We're a good family. We're Christians. And yeah, you just really learn like, oh, like when we get around other witnesses or whatever, we turn it on. And I learned that from a very early age that, oh, like we're different when we're not at meeting, and there's problems. There's problems going on, but not around other witnesses. We're fine. You know, it's very sad.
It really teaches you to suppress your own emotions.
Hmm. Yeah, and I don't know, you just don't find, you're separated from the world, so it's hard to find community that is safe, because it's just an environment where there's not a lot of trust, and it really does shape you. Now you had mentioned too that you were raised in the Spanish congregation, but you did have a shift in your teens to English congregation. Can you talk about that?
Oh, yeah. That's a big jump. But yes, that was kind of like the turning point in my faith. So before I go into that, I also just wanted to mention real quick that my parents were also, like many Jehovah's Witnesses, really into the doomsday stuff.
Oh yeah.
Like they taught me, and I think that's important to note because it is what really in the future would cause me to leave, right? So I wanted to mention that is I was taught, like many Jehovah's Witnesses, that the end of the world was very near. So that's a concept that I grew up with my whole life. So growing up in it as a young child, I really was taught that my time here was borrowed, that it was limited. So I never really thought about a future. And that's something that a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses experience. So I never thought about what job I wanted to do, what career. And Jehovah's Witnesses don't really do careers anyways. It's kind of like they see it as a waste of time because then the world is coming. But I never really thought about a future for myself because I was taught that um, the end of the world was going to come. And I specifically remember my mother when I was a kid. I remember one time I asked her like, "Do you think I'll ever become an adult like you, or will I ever grow to be your age?" And she sat me down and she said, "No, like I don't think you will ever become an adult because Jehovah's time will come before then." So my parents were very devout. They genuinely believed. My mom, it seems like she just genuinely believed that her kids wouldn't grow to would grow to see Armageddon. Like they really believed in that. So I just kind of wanted to add that in there just to give some more context of the way that I grew up. It just felt very my life felt temporary, which is a really
Yeah.
weird experience for a child. it's a weird experience to just feel like your life is going to be temporary.
Yeah, when a lot of other children, have parents, and
Mhm.
granted, there's a lot of children that don't have good parents, regardless of whatever cult or high control group they're a part of. So there's a large swath of different types of childhood, but when you grow up in an environment where your parents are never teaching you to live in the world and prepare and train you and guide you along a path of success in the world you live in, it's it's extremely challenging.
Absolutely.
You're given no tools.
Yeah.
The only tools you're given are from, the literature from the organization, and those as well are, in my opinion, not very good tools.
No, they're not, they're outdated, and they're not based on like recent, I don't know, I guess science, it's very
Yeah.
outdated
Mhm.
information. But talking when you asked me about that shift, my family did move to the English congregation. So what ended up happening was when I became a teenager, that is when my faith was really struggling just because I was kind of over it. I still believed in it because of the fear tactics, right? I didn't want to die in Armageddon. But, I was just kind of over it. My family was chaotic. My parents were not practicing what they were preaching, right? With what was going on at home. And I saw the realities of that. And so what ended up happening is I have two older sisters, as I mentioned. Oh, I mentioned I had three siblings. I didn't mention that I had two older sisters, but I have two older sisters. And the one in the middle, so I have an older sister. She's like 8 years older than me, and then I have one that's 4 years older than me, and then it's me, and then I have a younger brother. But the one who's 4 years older than me, she was really struggling because of what was going on at home. And she was kind of like the scapegoat for a lot of the issues that we were having. And it got to the point where she was struggling so much at our home life. It was a really toxic environment that she felt like she didn't have a way out. And her way out to leave this toxic home environment was to run away. So I was a teenager and my sister was maybe in her like 20s. She was really in 19 or 20. And in desperation to leave her environment, she ran away with like a secret boyfriend that she had. And all of this happened while I was out of the country because during this time I was really depressed. And so my parents were trying to cheer me up. And my older sister, was going to go to Japan to visit my family, like visit some cousins. So to cheer me up, they're like, okay, you can just go to Japan with your sister and maybe that'll make you feel better, whatever. So I was out of the country with my sister in Japan. And while I was out of the country, this was happening back home. My sister ran away. So
Mm.
when I came back to the United States, I came back not having a sister. Like I left having a sister and I came back. And my sister had ran away and she was excommunicated for that because, you can't do that. And she was a pioneer at the time. So she was a pioneer and ran away. And just like that, like in a snap, my sister was disfellowshipped. And that was the last time before I left for my trip that I would see her. And when I came back, she was gone. All her stuff was gone.
Was there any hint that she, I
No,
don't know, kind of struggled or had these kind of internal debates to kind of force her hand to move?
there was hints. There was hints that she obviously was struggling. She was trying to move out with other sisters, but it just never worked out. She asked people in the congregation, like there just wasn't any support for her. And that was frustrating because I mean, I don't know the details, but you can't tell me that people in the congregation didn't know what was happening in my family. Like it's like they're so nosy. They're in everyone's business. I'm sure someone knew that our home environment was getting pretty bad.
That's what it's that's the frustrating thing is because of the lack of support and genuine care
Right.
with that with the fear. It's like you could literally be just suffering internally, and
Exactly.
outwardly you're a pioneer, you're
Yeah.
doing all these things, and then it forces your hand to blow it up.
Absolutely, yeah, she was a pioneer, like, she should have been supported if her home life was difficult. She was also in school at the same time, so that's also, like, not encouraged, right? So, she just wasn't supported, and it goes back to, like, that story I told you, that lack of empathy, right? When I was a kid and that sister told me to roll up my pajamas, just, like, it's almost like, yeah, there's just, like, a lot of lack of empathy in the religion, which is weird because when you meet Jehovah's Witnesses, they're really nice. You wouldn't expect them to have that lack of empathy, but I think they hold each other to a higher standard. It's easier for them to be nice to worldly people because they don't know any better. They're worldly, but
Well, I
to
think
themselves, they
my
don't have
opinion
that
on that,
empathy.
it's the love bombing that they're great at,
Yeah, it's
and
the love bombing.
they only have the mental capacity and the ability to do all of that to get someone in, and then the moment they're in, there's no teaching of how to maintain.
Maintain it.
You know what I mean? It's like, in my opinion, like, you'll see some of these guys online and they teach other guys how to get women, you know? You know what I mean? It's like they teach them,
Yeah.
like, it's like, "Oh, yeah, you can bag this woman," but it's like, "But now what?" Like,
Right, what are the
how are you
tools, you know?
what are the tools to maintain the relationship and to continue on and grow together? Like, you're only teaching them the very first part, and I think that
Right.
that's a lot of witnesses, like, they just don't know how to live a very loving life.
Wow, you explained it so well. I completely agree. There's no, yeah, there's just no resources like that. The
Yeah.
love bombing is real. Like they really
It's
do
so
love
real.
bomb because I experienced it myself. And so she basically, to go back to the story, she ran away, and that was devastating for me. And I don't know if you know what it's like growing up as a Jehovah's Witness. That's your biggest fear growing up. I saw so many moments where the elders would go to the platform and be like, "So and so is no longer a Jehovah's Witness," and the room gets quiet, and it's like everyone's like, "Oh my God, like what did they do? What did they do to sin?" And it's a huge shame for the family.
Mhm.
And so that was so difficult for me because I was a teenager and I loved my sister. She was my best friend, and now she was gone. And the sad part about all of this is that I had no empathy for her either because I was mad. Like, I was also brainwashed, so I was upset with her. I
Mm.
kind of saw it as like, how dare you leave us behind? How dare you choose the world? Like, I was really angry at her and upset for her leaving. So basically, this was a very pivotal moment for me and for my family because my family was never the same after that. My parents struggled a lot in their marriage after that, and they blamed each other. My mom blamed my father and was like, this is all your fault. You should have been kinder. You should have been nicer. They just really blamed each other when they should have really been blaming the religion, but they also had a lot to blame. They created that toxic environment for their family. Um, and what happened is my mom would end up actually divorcing my father,
Oh,
which
wow.
is not allowed in the religion. I mean, it's allowed. You can divorce, but you can't, if you want to divorce on biblical terms, it has to be for cheating, right? One partner has to be unfaithful. And that wasn't the case for my parents. None of them had been unfaithful, but my mother just blamed my father for that situation and she was kind of over it. She was over the marriage, over everything. I don't blame her. But she ended up divorcing my dad and they got divorced. My father moved to a different congregation, but there was so much shame in that Spanish congregation. We had a sibling who ran away from home. My parents got divorced. And rather than feeling love, rather than feeling support during this difficult life transition, we had zero support. In fact, we were severely judged.
Mm.
In the Spanish congregation specifically, there's just a lot of judgmentalness.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the families, they're two-parent families. I think it's less common in the Latino community to get divorced. I think now it's more common now in 2026. I'm talking about when I was a kid, a teenager. It was less common. It was a stigma.
Yeah.
It was less normalized to get divorced back then in that culture. And so people were just treating us differently. And so my mother, she thought it was best for our family to just move congregations. So we did. We ended up moving, me, my mother, my older sister, the oldest one, and then my younger brother. We all moved to the English congregation. And that is where my life would completely change because at this point, experiencing all that, I was obviously like devastated, depressed, losing my mom, my dad moving out of the house. Even though I clashed a lot with my father, he's still my dad. You know, I still loved him. And it was hard for me to transition from having a two-parent household to just having a single mom. My dad was still there, like financially, you know, he was still involved, still visited us, but it was a hard transition, right? Like to live with my dad and for him to be gone. And it was hard on him to have that huge life change. Hey, I no longer live with my family. I'm a single man now. So he was going through his own life. I mean, he was going through his own things. And so he wasn't really present in my life at that time because he was really depressed and he was going through the divorce, right? That's,
How old were you at this time?
I was 14, 15. So we moved to the English congregation and things felt a little bit better there because this specific English congregation was a lot more diverse. There were more mixed families. So I went into this congregation feeling less like the outcast because my family wasn't the only family that the parents were divorced. There were a lot of single dads in that congregation and a lot of single moms, a lot of step parents, just more blended families. And that just was not common in the Spanish congregation at all. So automatically, I just felt less like an outsider. I just felt more accepted because of our situation. I felt more like I belonged more because I no longer was, you know, being judged because everyone else there also had a similar background.
Were you, and did you have people your age?
Yeah, there was a lot more people my age as well. There was a lot more teenagers around my age. So I started making a lot more friends. And as I mentioned, because we were new, even though grew up Jehovah's Witnesses, we were new to that congregation. I experienced what you would call the love bombing. I just felt way more accepted there. People were friendlier than the congregation that I grew up in. It was so strict. It felt like policed constantly. And this congregation felt so different. It just felt way more loving. And I think a part of it is that they had more empathy. They saw a single mom trying to raise two kids on her own. Well, not on her own technically, but yeah, I mean, basically she's on her own. And I think that's where a lot of the love bombing came.
Well, that's good. It's good that you at least got to experience, even though it was love bombing, you got to experience the empathy to some extent. Um,
Yes, a little
so
bit of it.
yeah. So there was some transformative years. You actually kind of recalibrated and really kind of doubled down and got more involved at this time.
Yeah. So this time around, I became way more devout because my whole life I kind of thought, okay, maybe it's not the religion, maybe it's just my family. So going to the English congregation made me realize, okay, maybe it was never the religion. It was always just my family. And maybe this is actually a good thing. And what I experienced growing up was just kind of like an outlier. You know, I was like, maybe this is what the experience should be like. So during this time, because of the divorce, it was really hard on my mom. And she's always been someone who struggled with mental health issues. She's always had depression her whole life. And during this time, because of the divorce, she kind of checked out of being a mom. She kind of just gave up. She, you know, as a Jehovah's Witness parent, it's your responsibility to be your kid's Bible teacher. And she checked out. She just wasn't giving us Bible study anymore. She was just depressed. So what she did is she asked for help in the congregation and she asked an elder and his wife to become the Bible teachers for me and my brother. At this point, my eldest sister would end up moving to the sign language congregation. So it was just me, my mom, my brother. So our family just kept getting smaller. My sister was still involved in the religion, but she was out in the sign language congregation doing her own thing. So that
And
is,
were you baptized yet at this time?
I was not baptized, no. And so that was a really important part of the story too, because this particular couple, they literally became like my surrogate parents, like my adopted family. They weren't just my Bible teachers. They became like the parents that I didn't have at that time. And they had a pretty big family in the religion, in that congregation. They were pretty well known, and it was like they were pretty prominent. And like I think their names are pretty recognized, like people know who they are, and they took us under their wing. And that is where I started to become more devout, take my faith more seriously, getting more involved in the religion, because I just had more of that transformative experience. I started to really feel, now that I think about it, it really wasn't the religion. It was more of like the love that I was receiving, the love that I deserved, the love that I needed my whole life. I should have had that experience from the start, but I never experienced it up until that moment. So that made me, basically did a 180 for me and made me, I would call it almost like, I kind of feel like a born again Christian, but like the Jehovah's Witness version of that. I
Yeah.
became more devout, more into the religion.
There is a truth that it's like it's just human connection. You can just feel love and care, and everyone gravitates towards that. Like that's what we all want. Um, to some extent, it's a shame. It's so weird because it's a shame it happened because it kept you in the religion longer. But it's also wonderful that it did happen because you were able to get, from what you're telling me, something that you
Yeah.
truly wanted.
Yeah, that's true. And I don't look back on that with any being upset. Like,
Yeah.
that was a moment in my life where I needed community, and they
Hmm.
provided that for me. And I'm really grateful that they saw two struggling kids, two teenagers that didn't come from a good upbringing, came from a broken family. And this couple, I will always be grateful for them for being there at that time of my life where I needed them. I look back on that and I never got a chance to thank them, but I do thank the entire community for being there for me. And so that is definitely what I needed at that time in my life. And
And it's wonderful too because they could have just phoned it in,
yeah,
and they didn't.
yeah, they could have just been like whatever, you know. But
Yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah,
Tuesdays we'll sit down with them. We'll go over a book, whatever. They
yeah,
did
they
more.
really integrated us into their life.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, they just felt like my parents. We did barbecues, dinners, like almost every week. I mean, from my point of view, they were my parents, and they also had cousins and nieces and nephews that were around my age. So I genuinely felt like I was a part of their family. Those kids felt like my siblings. I felt like I had new siblings. It was just really tight knit, and I started to make more friends in the congregation, and I got the JW experience that I think a lot of people experience, which makes it hard when you leave, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I also kind of wanted to throw this in there. I started to just get more interested in doctrine too. Like my whole life as a kid, I never really was interested in the doctrine. You get you get they just regurgitate the same information and you just accept it. So I started to really take my faith seriously and started studying. And yeah, that was a point in my life where I was definitely more going into this period where I was very devout.
And so this led to, assume I asked earlier, but this led to your baptism. What was that time of your life like?
Yeah, this eventually led to my baptism. So throughout high school, it's very interesting because even in high school, the high school that I went to, it's called Metro Tech. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, being from Phoenix, but this high school was known for having a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses because it's a trade school. It's a high school that kind of prepares you to have a job. So they had programs like nursing and a bunch of other things. And I went to the high school. When I started there, most of my friends were worldly, when I moved to the English congregation, I stopped being friends with all those people, and I only was friends with other Jehovah's Witnesses. And so my faith was pretty strong. And then towards graduation, that is when I decided to get baptized. And after baptism, it was around that time where I had a trip with this family to go to Bethel. And we went to Bethel, and I loved it. I really loved the experience. I got to meet a bunch of Bethelites, and that's when I had it in my mind. That's gonna be me. I'm gonna go to Bethel. Like, there was no question about it. And I started talking to people in my congregation, like, I want to go to Bethel. So I started taking the steps um to go to Bethel. And so this was around the time that I graduated. I became not a regular pioneer. I became an auxiliary pioneer. And I was a little bit unconventional because I knew just logically, I was thinking, how do I have the best chances to going to Bethel? Especially as a woman. Usually they usually recruit men. And I really wanted to go to Bethel, and I found it to be an obstacle because I didn't really have any skills. So I told myself, when I go to Bethel, I don't want to go and be a cleaner. Nothing against that. I don't have anything against people who do that for a living. It's just not what I wanted to do. Didn't want to go to the house of God just to clean toilets, just to cook. I wanted to do something impactful. Like, I wanted to do something more that aligned with what I was passionate about. So I told myself what I'll do is I, since I had graduated and gotten baptized, I was auxiliary pioneer. Before I had graduated high school, I decided to enroll in college. My sister had already gone to college, and that was fine. She was in the Spanish congregation when she went to college, and obviously there was people who were judgmental, but she didn't really get that much of a backlash about it. So that is why I really enrolled in college, which is funny. I really did it because I wanted a better chance to go to Bethel. Like, my plan was to go to community college, get my associate's degree in computer science, be eventually a regular pioneer, and then by the time I would apply, I would have all this stuff stacked. Like, oh, I have these skills that they need, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
would,
it's such a curious thing because at the time they frowned upon
right.
college,
Yeah.
but witness so Bethel, for people that don't know, is basically the headquarters for Jehovah's Witnesses.
Hmm.
And they would love to have anyone with a good resume, like a lawyer or a doctor. They would love to have you work for free and provide your skills. So it is actually a great mindset to do that, but at the time they shunned you and frowned upon it.
Yeah. And that is where the cracks started to fall. And that really was when I started to doubt. I hadn't really doubted my faith deeply until that moment because everything I was doing was because I wanted to go to Bethel. I didn't say that to people in the congregation, hey, I'm going to college, because I knew it wouldn't be received well. They'd be like, oh, you don't need to. I knew that they would say, you don't need to do that. You don't need to go to college to go to Bethel. You'll still have a chance. But I knew that they wouldn't get it. And I knew that the way that I was doing it was unconventional. I knew that it was a path that just wasn't common. I was just kind of outside the box. I was thinking bigger. I was like, okay, well, I just had such a big goal that I was willing to do anything, and going to college, which is kind of frowned upon, I was willing to do that. But it was a weird experience to kind of be doing this for this goal, yet they don't support that goal. And it's just weird. I'm like, okay, well, I'm doing this for this religion, for my faith, but yet I'm being treated pretty poorly for that decision for going to college, despite it being for them. Like, it was just kind of
Yeah.
a weird experience.
And how did your mom react to this goal of yours?
My mom wasn't too happy about it because my parents supported my older sister to go to college. And it worked out for her because she was a regular pioneer and she had stayed in the religion. But they were worried because they saw it as a risk. Think about it. I mean, it was a risk to let her go to college. So they thought, was it really a risk to let their other kids go to college. So my mom wasn't really, at this point, her opinion would soon change, but at this point in the time, she wasn't really against it, but she wasn't really for it. She was kind of more like neutral, like, okay, you're gonna do what you want to do. She was more than happy that I was devout. That was good enough for her. And she was happy about that. So most of the backlash of me going to community college was from the other Jehovah's Witnesses and from my surrogate parents, basically.
Yeah, I assume there's probably a mindset of like, oh, it's just a community college.
Yeah.
They can still kind of focus on spiritual pursuits. Um, but the moment it starts to get more evolved, a higher level college or a higher level degree, that's when it can turn into a different conversation. Now you started to say that this was some of the first initial cracks. What were some of the other cracks?
So obviously, when I started going to community college, the backlash was instant. I was told to drop out. I was told that I was wasting my time. And that was really difficult for me because I was doing my best. I mean, I was young too. I was like, what, 18, 19? I was so young and I was quite literally like balancing it all. I would literally preach on campus. They had a booth on campus. I would go to the booth and I would go to class. And that was severely damaging for me because I wasn't supported by my community. And I was constantly being discouraged. Some of the other cracks were things that I had suppressed for a long time. And one thing particular was the governing body. When I was growing up in it, and for those who don't know what the governing body is, they are basically the men, the men who are in charge of the Jehovah's Witness religion. So the Mormon Church has what they call prophets. I would say like that's the Jehovah's Witness equivalent. Is like they're like the top highest level.
Mhm.
And growing up in it, they always seemed like this distant entity that I never knew. They weren't really present in the community. So it was easier for me to see them and respect them because I didn't know anything about them. You know, Jehovah's Witnesses didn't really know the governing body that well in the early days.
Mhm.
But that's when when I was a teenager, that's when JW broadcasting came out. And this was an extremely important moment, I think, for Jehovah's Witness history because Jehovah's Witnesses had always been against tele, what is it? The Christian televangelists. They've always been
Yeah,
against that.
tele-evangelizing.
Yeah, they've always been against, like, not against it, but they've always been kind of negative towards that. And so when JW Broadcasting came out, they made this whole thing where they would have weekly recorded tapes of the governing body giving talks. They started producing content, videos, music videos. And although that made me more connected to the religion, the downside of that was I got to see and get to know the governing body members more through the broadcasting. And I couldn't help but realize some weird things. Like some of the stuff that they would say, and I can't point to you with to any particular things because it's been so long now. I don't remember the specific things that they said that threw me off, but just kind of seeing their presence on the broadcasting,
Mhm.
getting to know them on that level, right? I just saw something was off about that.
It's interesting you say that because I agree with you 1,000%. Like there was something better about not knowing, like the
Yeah,
unknown, the kind of the man behind the curtain. You're not quite sure. I remember growing up and just genuinely believing, oh, these men talk with God. You know,
yeah,
they are so powerful in a direct connection to Jehovah, to us, and they just didn't really talk about it. They weren't really, you kind of knew their names, but you didn't see who they were. There weren't photos, there weren't videos.
yeah,
And then the moment they decided to go public and create this JW Broadcasting kind of internet channel, and all this content, I uh, I think that waked a lot of people up.
Yeah, it did
Where
because
it's just
yeah,
like, "You guys are just men, you're telling dad jokes, like,
exactly.
what's going on here?"
And and another reason why is because it's a stark contrast for people like me who were raised in it. And I was raised old school JW, right? I said like super strict, very like old, very traditional Jehovah's Witness upbringing. So yeah, they were always this entity where I was like, whoa, like almost like mysterious and like you respect them and you didn't know who they were. It was like, who is the governing body? But it was better that way. Huge difference with the broadcasting. And I just kind of started to feel like they're just a bunch of old dudes.
Yep.
As a
Yeah.
teenager, I just was like, wow, this my whole life. I saw them, I put them on a pedestal. And like, no offense, I don't want to make fun of anyone, but there was one in particular, what's his name? He like talks very animated. Let? I
Oh,
don't
Brother
remember.
Let, Stephen Let.
Brother Stephen Let. I just thought he was off. Like the way he
So,
spoke. He kind of reminds me, I don't know, there's this cult. It's called the Heaven's Gate. He looks like the Heaven's Gate guy.
yeah, Stephen Let did a talk at the Tucson convention one year. I don't know if you went to it. But yeah, very, very animated brother, just, just he's physically large, he's probably 6'5", and
Yeah.
260. And yeah, just, yeah, I agree. It's weird because at the time I was in, I did look forward to his talks because he was so animated. It's like at least he's bringing some different energy. But the farther along I got and I saw him performing, it turned me off big time.
That's interesting that you say that because for me, it was instant. When the broadcasting came on, it felt off. Like the performativeness was weird.
Your radar was already like ready
Yeah,
to go.
I don't know why I clocked it. I clocked it real quick. I was like, something's off about this. And I think it was just like a part of me also kind of felt like they always seemed very intelligent. And my whole life, not to like to my own horn, but I always felt like I had to suppress any intelligence I had in it too, the religion, because you never want to say too much. You never want to, you know, think too big because it could be controversial. My whole life I had suppressed that part of myself is just thinking outside the box. And I'd always seen the governing body as like, whoa, they have to be like super smart, like. And so I was seeing these talks and I'm like, bro, this guy doesn't sound very like, I don't know, like what is he even talking about? I just felt like he just sounded like, I'm like, whatever, like this doesn't really, I don't know. It
Yeah.
just didn't come across that way, and the animated persona was off to me. I just thought it was really weird. So that was one of the other cracks. And at this point, I was in college, and I had met this kid who was Christian, and he was really annoying. He always tried to talk to me. He always tried to debate me, and he asked me about the 144,000. And he's like, "Oh yeah," and he knew about it. And this is the thing that I think that is really interesting about Jehovah's Witnesses. A lot of people don't know about what Jehovah's Witnesses really believe. Growing up in it, outsiders like worldly people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses, they never really challenged my beliefs because they never knew what my beliefs really were. And if
Mhm.
they did know my beliefs, it was very surface level. Oh, you don't celebrate holidays, you don't celebrate Christmas, but non-Jehovah's Witnesses have no idea really of the deep doctrine, right?
Mhm.
What do Jehovah's Witnesses believe in regards to life after death and the 144,000, 1914? These really niche doctrines. He knew about that, and that caught me
Mhm.
off guard. I was not expecting for this kid to know about that, and I was ashamed because here I am trying to go to Bethel, and I did not know how to explain my own doctrine to him. I was really embarrassed.
Yeah.
And that was the catalyst for me. I was like, you know what? If I want to go to Bethel, I need to be the best Jehovah's Witness and I need to know all the doctrine because
Oh boy.
I'll be
Yep.
damned if I'm ever in a situation where I don't know how to explain my own beliefs. I thought it was embarrassing. I was really embarrassed by it and I was ashamed. So,
I'm sure I know where this is going.
yeah.
The erotic thing about doing your own research.
Doing your own research. Yeah, I did, guy. Shocker! I did my own research. I was like, I need to know everything. I had good intentions. I was like, man, I'm gonna know everything about the history. Like, I'm gonna be that JW. And to be honest, this is what's interesting where I think that this was different than a lot of my peers. A lot of my peers, because I'm Gen Z, they don't really do that. Like, they're not really interested. Like, the younger generation, I guarantee you about 80% of them, they're not interested or they had no interest in really diving deep into the doctrine. I think a
Yeah.
lot of them, my peers at the time, were okay with just knowing the surface level version of the religion.
Yep.
What made me different is that I was trying to go to Bethel. Like, I had these goals that I felt like I needed to know the religion better to accomplish my goal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I started researching everything about the doctrine, and that is when they changed the generation teaching. It was around that time. Oh my gosh.
Got the
That was
whiteboard up. They were ready.
oh my god, it was so bad, and I remember being in that I remember it so vividly. I was in the meeting that day, that when they came out with that, and I was like, "Huh?" It made no sense to me, and I basically had to tell myself, "Hey, like, they're trying to change the definition of what generation is." And that was really scary to me because it was the first time where I was like, they're trying to change the definition, so can't they just change the definition of anything?" Like, it was really a moment where I was really questioning it, and I was trying to accept it, so I had a chat with my elder, the coordinator of
Mm.
the congregation. I chatted with him, and I said, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. I don't understand it, and I want to." You know what he did? He told me to go on the website. And that was frustrating for me because I'm like, "Really?"
Because deep down, he didn't know. He was just like,
Yes, that's what
he's
was,
like,
like, concerning. I'm like, "You're the coordinator of the congregation." I thought he was gonna school me. I thought he was gonna school me. I thought he was gonna tell me, "Yeah, this is what." I thought he was gonna know everything, and I'm like, "Well, he literally doesn't know anything." Like, he literally told me to go on the website, like.
well, and this is tough because, back to what you were saying about a lot of people just kind of going with the flow and not really caring. Like, the whole idea about Jehovah's Witnesses is like they were given specific information that set them apart. Things like 1914 being, when Jesus comes invisibly to rule in heaven, and things like the generational teaching, which is based on a scripture in Matthew, that, this generation will not pass before these things take place. These promised things of, Armageddon coming and the new system arriving where we're going to be on this, new paradise like earth, and these hopes and dreams that many Jehovah's Witnesses base their whole lives on. And they famously had a book and a watchtower talking about the generational teaching that millions now living will never die.
Yeah.
And so it was a hope. And one day you just wake up and it's like, oh, that's different now. Psych. It's like it just changed. And so I think that's where a lot of people that really do follow the teachings beyond surface level,
Mhm.
because a lot of the teachings are just like love your neighbor, be like Jesus. And then it's like then every once in a while you'll get like an article talking about these core foundational things, which is what the religion's based on, and then they just have new light and change it. And
Yeah.
anyone that has a brain like yours would immediately go like,
Clocked
this
it.
this math ain't mathin'.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking, and I think that it's interesting because now I'm not a Jehovah's Witness anymore, but I've heard that they're changing a lot of things now. But for me at that time, that was really the first major change that they did. This was like a really important moment because prior to that, there really wasn't, other than the broadcasting being released, there hadn't been any doctrinal changes in a long time. This was one of the first major ones. Now, within recent years, there's been many, and people have accepted it. But I'm curious. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people left at that time because that wasn't the main reason why I left. But after that, it was hard for me to trust them because I was really
Yeah.
questioning it.
Yeah, the way I always kind of think about it is everyone, whether they realize it or not, has only so many
Mhm.
pillars to their core beliefs. and you can only take so many pillars that fall
Yeah.
before you're like, okay, this is now the final one, the cherry on top, whatever, where it's
Hmm.
finally like these all add up to now this doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a one for you. What was the final one, and what did that kind of look like for you once you had the wake up moment?
There was two moments that I had the wake up moment. The one that led to the next thing where I was like, okay, that's off, was I was trying to do research, right? And learning more about the religion. The generation teaching came out. I was like, okay, that's weird. The student in my class who was asking me about my beliefs, all those things were compounding into research. This was the creepiest, I think, in my opinion, the most creepiest moment for me, where I'm like, okay, this is beyond. This is something that I never expected. I don't remember what I was studying, but oh, I can remember now. I was studying something, trying to find more information about like, I think it was evolution, because like I said, I wanted to be the best Jehovah's Witness and know everything. I wanted to be like the best Jehovah's Witness that could, you know,
Refute everything.
refute every exactly. You said it. Refute everything. And I had a list. I was like, okay, Jesus, 1914. I had a list of things that I was going to go down. Evolution was on there. And I genuinely didn't feel like I had a good grasp on it. When you study the books before you get baptized, um, they skim over it really. It's not like a deep dive.
Mm.
So I went to their JW library and I started researching evolution. There was an article that quoted a scientist. He's like an
Mhm.
evolutionary scientist. And I don't remember what magazine it was. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at it. But they quoted him and they basically said, oh, like, the quote was like that he agrees with the Jehovah's, or he agrees with that the evolution is it's not a concept that is realistic or whatever. Basically, his argument agreed with the Jehovah's Witness belief. And I don't know what possessed me to do this, but I did something that a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses don't do. I looked up the original source, the
Mhm.
original scientist, his work, his original quote. And I don't know why I did. I don't know. I was in my research mode. I was like, oh, I would love to know more about this scientist because I kind of was more like not trying to find something at fault, but it was more just me trying to learn more about it and be like, oh, like let's do more research, right?
It's funny you say that because I had a very similar trajectory. And it's also ironic because, as you know, going through school, that's just part of research. That's just part of
Yeah,
it.
it is.
You look up
Yeah.
sources, you validate, you research everything, especially if you're having to write a paper. You want to make sure you have quality sources, which, the witnesses don't want you to develop that skill set. But when I was going through my kind of research phase and waking up, I would do the same thing where I would be at the meeting and
Mhm.
a Watchtower article would happen and they'd quote some person in the world that was a scientist or whatever. And I would circle their name or write it down and go, I'm going to look that up. And like every time, it was like, this is just cherry picked.
100%.
It's like
Then that yeah,
this doesn't even make sense. You guys just took everything out of context.
absolutely. And that's exactly what I found. I found he was completely taken out of context. And I was really upset about it because it was one of the first moments, like really like tangible moments, right? Where I realized I was like, wow, this is purposeful. Like I read the original source and I was appalled that this guy does he believes in evolution. He's not against it. But reading that quote led me to believe that he was anti-evolution because he was like some sort of scientist. I don't remember what he did, but what he did. But it led me to believe their narrative, and it was clear as day, research looking at his stuff, that that was not the case. They took it completely out of context, and at that moment, I was like, "Oh my God, I can't not, I have to accept at this point that there are things that I'm being taught. There are things in the literature that are disingenuous and not honest, and they're
Let me
lying to a
let me
certain
ask
extent."
you let me ask you one layer extra,
Yeah.
where you think about this, because clearly people that work at Bethel researching and writing articles have to make these choices on how publication will print. Where do you land? Do you think that these people writing these articles truly believe, or do you think that they know better? They're taking this completely out of context and they're writing a sensational piece just to kind of angle it towards how they want to.
I think that that's an interesting question. I think that they believe in it, but they're so far in that they're willing to do anything, even be dishonest, just to prove a point,
Yeah,
just to show the narrative. And I think that behavior comes directly from the governing body. I
yeah.
think that there are policies that they have, there are things that they have in their doctrine that they do that may not be fully honest, but I genuinely think that they compartmentalize,
Hmm.
and I think that they genuinely justify it in their own minds somehow.
Yes.
I don't think that's healthy for them. I don't think it's good for your mental health in the long run to have that mindset. I think it
That's
goes
where I mostly,
against them.
yeah.
But
That's
I
where I
think,
mostly land.
yeah, and I think that's what I think. But I think that they can compartmentalize. I couldn't do that. I couldn't be on their same standard, and I could not justify the fact that they were taking all these things out of context, and it really shook my faith, and really already I was finding cracks in it, right? And that was the moment where I'm like, wow, now I really can't trust them. So, and another thing too is like Jehovah's Witnesses, as a Jehovah's Witness growing up in it, I was taught a lot of good skills. And one of those skills was to, I was ahead of my class for reading. Like, I was taught at a young age to read the Bible, to speak to people, to, have all these skills. And one of those skills was to research. But yet, when you use your skills to research, then you're punished. Like, right? Like, I was just doing what I was taught my whole life. Jehovah's Witnesses, their whole identity, their history comes from Bible students. That is our
Hmm.
identity. Like, we came from these Bible students who, looking back at those videos that they show, you have a sense of pride where back then they went against everything. They went against
Hmm.
mainstream Christianity and they fought to find the truth. They organized their own religion. Charles Taze Russell, was a change maker and he did something beyond his time, whatever. They really have an identity in that
Hmm.
to be students of the Bible. Jehovah's
Yeah.
Witnesses pride themselves on that. Yet I did everything right. Yet by finding this out and doing using my skills, and realizing, hey, like they're not citing correctly, they're using out of context. If you call that out, if you tell your elder about that, then you are told that you're out of line. Then you're accused of questioning the governing body. You're accused of questioning the organization, and it comes back at you. When in reality, your intentions were never bad. You were just really doing what they always taught you to do.
Is that what in fact happened to you, or where were you at mentally with this like kind of new knowledge that you're finding through research?
I was struggling a lot because at that point it's like, come on, like where do I go from there? Where do I go from there? Where do I go? Like, do I just keep having faith? And I wanted to go to Bethel. That changes my goal. It was just kind of it just
Well,
shook me.
I find people were programmed, and either we continue our program or we fight it. So like in moments like that, my mind goes to, oh, I'll just kind of bury this. I'll just keep it quiet. Or, because you learn like, oh, I'll take this to a brother. I'll take this to a trusted confidant, a father, a mother. And just inevitably, it always comes back where like, oh, they don't care what I'm saying. And in fact, because of what I said, I'm now in trouble or I'm looked at differently. And so you learn, bury, don't talk, don't communicate, don't have open thoughts, don't. And so that's kind of my curiosity. Like in this moment, what was your choice?
I buried it. I was not ready to open that can of worms. So, but a part of me still felt like I needed to learn more I was like, there's something more that I don't know about. There has to be. So I decided to, continue going to meetings, continue. I was still auxiliary pioneer at this point. I kept everything up, and I told myself, let me keep researching, but in private. Like, let me just keep doing what I'm doing. And I kind of allowed myself at that point because I said, okay, look, if they've been dishonest, I think I'm okay to research a bit more outside of the organization. And I started to look into stuff. I just started Googling the religion online. I came across the CSA, the Australian Royal Commission, the child sexual abuse, that they had been hiding it, covering it up, not reporting it. And that was really a hard watch. I watched all the case files, and I came across that video of one of the governing body members denying that he was at all inspired by God, or denying that he was a governing body member. So those two things, I really realized, okay, you know, at this point, I was still struggling. I still wanted to believe, but I told myself maybe maybe it's like the organization, but maybe like I still believed in Jehovah. I still believed in the like the foundation of what it is to be a Jehovah's Witness. And I was okay. I was like, okay, well, maybe this is just an organizational thing. A lot of religions deal with that, but it was kind of hard for me because I was like, okay, well, if I continue, I'm okay. If I continue on this path, that means I'm okay with being in a religion that actively silences victims. And that was really hard for me to, I guess, wrap around my mind. Like, I wanted to stay in it, but I knew the implications of that. And I would, I was really struggling with that, and like started to pull back a little bit. Um, and I started getting really depressed because I was like, okay, like the cracks of my foundation were cracking. And at this point, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to leave. I was afraid that my family might they would shun me if I leave, right? And I was young. I was 19, right? I was still in community college at this point. This all happened during my second year of community college. So it happened in a short amount of time, these events. But what really finally broke me was a situation that happened with my younger brother. So my younger brother, he's 3 years younger than me. So he was still in high school when this happened. He was a minor. And he had a new Bible teacher. Remember those that couple I told you about that were my surrogate parents? They would end up moving to a different congregation because they needed to go to a congregation that had a need. So they were reassigned. And so my brother needed a new Bible teacher. And so he ended up getting assigned to a different Bible teacher. He was the coordinator of our congregation. And my brother started to feel uncomfortable with this coordinator because during their sessions, he would use moments to just talk badly about his previous Bible teacher. And keep in mind, his previous Bible teacher was like a dad to us. Like, this is like our family, basically. And he would just say weird things like, oh, like, he doesn't know what he's doing. You guys should be further along in the book. Like, what were you guys even doing? It seems like you guys were wasting time. This man was just like, to be quite frank, he was talking shit. He was talking shit about his previous Bible teacher. My brother felt really uncomfortable by it. So he came to me and he told me, dude, I don't want him to be my Bible teacher. I don't feel comfortable with him. He just talks badly about my previous teacher, and I just don't like our sessions. So I encouraged him, hey, I think that you should tell him that it's not working out, and that you should that you want to find a new teacher. So my brother actually told his previous Bible teacher, hey, what was going on? I don't know what to do. This person's talking bad about you. and it's making me uncomfortable. And basically, he told him, "Oh, don't worry about it. You should just talk to him." Um, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say without saying names,
Yeah.
but maybe I can just make a pseudonym. I don't know.
Sure. Whatever you want to do.
He's like, "You should talk to Adam about this. Like just maybe you guys can work it through." Before my brother could talk to him about it, his Bible teacher, his previous one, had a chat with the coordinator, and it did not go well. Apparently, I think the coordinator took it personal. I don't know what that conversation was, but I'm assuming that he told him, "Hey, why are you talking shit about me?" Like so there was at this point, um, I wasn't going to the meetings as much. I was trying to kind of fade, but I was still mentally in, despite you know,
You
learning
still
about
had
all
the
those.
fear.
Yeah, because of the fear, despite learning about all the cracks of like that wasn't true, like all the issues with the religion, I still wasn't going. But I got roped back into it because my mom was like noticing that I wasn't going to meetings, and she said, "If you don't start going to meetings, I'm not sure if I really want you at the house." I was like,
Wow.
okay, now my living situation's being affected. And at this point, I had also mentioned to her that I wanted eventually to continue to university. And she mentioned to me that if I did, I would not be welcomed at the house. I would be kicked out. So obviously, like, there were so many things that were not aligning anymore. I was like, wow, like, that's messed up. You're basically threatening to kick me out if I go to university. So my faith was kind of like I wasn't going to meetings as much. So I think she was upset that I wasn't doing what she wanted me to do.
Yeah. You said it
So
earlier, as long as she still saw you kind of being fully immersed,
yeah,
she was okay with it, but
yeah,
now it's not balanced in her eyes. Yeah.
exactly. So I ended up going to one of the meetings, and I after the meeting, the elder pulls me aside with my brother, and he said, "Oh, like you're gonna have to meet us in the back room. We have to have a conversation with you and your brother and your mom."
Mm.
I was really caught off guard because, like I said, I had missed a few meetings, but usually, like, if you're not a Jehovah's Witness, that's really off to be told that. For the main reason is usually when you go to the back room, it's because you sinned or you did something wrong. Like when you go to the back room to have a conversation with the elders, it's usually because you've been accused of doing something. So I was really nervous. I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
So we go to the back room. It's me, my brother, and my mom. And the coordinator of the congregation starts yelling at my brother. He starts berating, and keep in mind, my brother's a minor. He's 16, 17, and he just had a breakdown. He started yelling at my brother, telling him, "Oh, like, I'm here today. We're here today because you, like, are starting to, like, are saying things about me that aren't true." And he started accusing my brother of defamation, of, there's a word for it, that you can disfellowship someone for, like, lying or, like,
Like slander?
slander. He said, "You're slandering me." He's like, you can get a fellowship for that? I could disfellowship you for that? For slander? For saying lies about me? For telling this other elder that I was talking badly about him? Like, and it's the whole time. I mean, it's like, my brother wasn't lying. He was telling the truth.
Yeah.
And so he's berating my brother, and then he turns to me and he tells me, "Oh, and you're not that innocent either." He starts yelling at me because I've been missing meetings, and apparently I said I said something that was rude to his wife. Like I made like a condescending comment, which the comment wasn't condescending. Um, I just took a phone call during the meeting, and I needed to make sure it was an emergency, and she called me out for it. She's like, "Oh, I saw you were on your phone," and I said, first of all, everyone's on their phone because we use JW Library on the app, so why does that matter? Second of all, I was making sure that this wasn't an emergency because my dad never calls me. So if he calls me, hey, it could be an emergency, and I was answering it. So sorry about that, and I walked
Yeah,
away.
just another example of control and watching and tattletaling. Just it's
Yes.
like, let me live. I'm on my phone. I have to take a call. Mind your own business.
Right? Like Jehovah doesn't care if I have to take a little call during the meeting. So he started yelling at me for that, for being disrespectful to his wife. Keep in mind, I'm 19. My brother's a minor. We're extremely uncomfortable because he's yelling at us, and we just start sobbing. We're just
Oh,
crying because we're kids.
yeah. It's
We
so
were
sad
little.
because it's very ego driven with that man. He felt undermined, attacked. No doubt the other brother spoke to him very sternly. And so there
That
was
must have happened, yeah.
yeah, there was probably a level of like, oh, he's kind of stepping on my turf. You do find out like, having a father who was an elder and him, regaling stories to me, like these men are always fighting for position. They're always jockeying for power and authority. It's all they got. So no doubt this is why this conversation happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know the behind the scenes, but he just completely overreacted. And it was disturbing because there was one other elder there, silent the entire time. The more disturbing part is our own mother was in the room. She let it happen.
Yeah,
She just stood there silently and allowed this man to verbally abuse her kids
yeah,
for an hour. And that completely broke me. I left that meeting, and there's more to the story. At that point, my sister, she was still disfellowship, but she actually moved into our home because she was struggling financially. So my sister was back home. So he actually mentioned that when he was yelling, he kind of accused my sister of corrupting us. It was weird because at the point, even though she moved with us and was living with us, we were still actively shunning her, which is a real thing. Jehovah's Witnesses like to say in the courts that they don't shun to that extreme. They do. My sister was living with us, and I never really had conversations with her or talked to her in the home because I was actively shunning her. So he started even using that, like was like, "Oh, your sister's corrupting you." So after that meeting, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I have to like that was the final straw. I'm like this. It made me realize that it was all a sham. Like it's just men doing men things.
yeah, yeah,
They're just men. They're really just men. And what made me even more upset was I am very like someone who like I need justice for this. And I talked to the other elders, and the other elders I was really cool with. And it was weird because I thought I was cool with him too. I mean, we were friends at one point. So for him to turn around and behave this way was really shocking to me. I talked to the other elders in the congregation, and they all looked at me and told me, "Yeah, we're not surprised." They straight up told me that.
wow,
This has happened before, and I'm sorry that happened. He shouldn't have done that. They agreed with me and said, every single one I talked to them, oh yeah, he's done that to me. We're sorry that happened. And that almost made me more mad because they had allowed this person to be in power. This person who clearly has most likely used their power and abused it. Who
hmm,
knows how many poor, like, I just feel so bad. Like, who knows how many people were in that room and were just, oh my God, like,
yeah, yeah.
just,
To yell at you guys and abuse you in that way for what happened, you can only imagine how it would be
oh my
ratcheted up for
gosh.
something more serious.
I cannot imagine what actually committing a sin would be like and being in that room. And I literally just sobbed. I just felt so bad because it affected me emotionally to realize that, like, that was really what was happening. And I get emotional about it today too because it breaks my heart because most Jehovah's Witnesses may not know that's what happens behind closed doors. They may never know until they're in that situation. And I'm not saying every congregation's like that. There's probably congregations that don't do that, where they're not yelling at you, but they allowed a culture for that to allow to happen. So how many other congregations have a similar culture
Yeah,
where someone's abusing their power? And the worst part was like they made the elder apologize. So the consequence for the elder was he had to apologize to my brother and I. He apologized. It was literally like I'm sorry you felt that way, which to me that's not a real apology.
wow, yeah,
He literally said he texted it too. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry that you guys felt that way." And I was like, "You know what? You're disgusting. You should be ashamed." I mean, I didn't say that, but I said you should be ashamed to speaking to two kids like that. Like the type of twisted person you have to be to feel that offended by two kids.
yeah. And to phone in an apology like that, like I always go back to I personally feel very empathetic towards people, and I can kind of carry that. And if I was in that position and I saw two young ones crying, that would affect me. I'd be like, oh, I messed up in my approach,
Yeah,
you
he
know,
didn't care.
like whatever. It's one thing if you genuinely feel like, "Hey, I have to talk to these people about something that they did wrong." But if the result is something like that, it's like, "That's on you, man." Like, you're the adult that didn't approach this correctly. Um, and they don't have that level of awareness.
Yeah, he clearly didn't. And when I told my friends about it in the congregation, like the girls around my age, my Bible teacher, they didn't believe me. They did not believe me because he had a persona that was kind
Mhm,
by everyone's opinion. He seemed like I thought he was a normal person, but yeah, they just didn't believe me. They thought that I was exaggerating. Oh well, you know, we don't follow Jehovah for the elders. We follow Jehovah for Jehovah, and the elders believed me because they had experienced it, but everyone else that I talked to didn't believe me, and that was really hard too. And that same night, I came home and I sat down with my brother and I told him, "I'm sorry this happened, and I don't think it's right." And I told him, "I don't know what you will decide to do, but I am letting you know that this tonight was the last day I will ever go to the congregation."
mm,
And I said I can't. Like, I not only at this point know that the faith is not what it says to be, I know on an individual level, systemically in these congregations, it's not what we think it is. And once again, I really was shook by that. I was horrified, and I felt really guilty about that, about how this could have been happening behind closed doors, and I just never knew. And it also reminded me of the CSA cases. I'm like, wow, I just went back to that, the fact that they're so willing to cover it up, and I couldn't be a part of that system anymore.
I'm
So,
curious, I have a question.
yeah.
I don't know, I guess my mind goes to in that moment when you're in the back room and you were crying, did you know at the time that part of the reason you were crying is because you made that decision then?
No, I
Mm.
wasn't crying at all because of that. I really was crying because I was so uncomfortable.
So what
I
from that uncomfortable moment to then making that decision, like what when did you make that decision like I'm finally done?
It was that same night. Yeah. I was
Wow.
there. I was like I was I think I was in shock. I was crying and my brother was crying because we were scared.
Yeah.
I have to mention that we were young. My brother was a kid. I
I
was
mean,
an adult.
it's such a huge move. I mean, obviously we've talked
Mhm.
about the many cracks, but it's like that was your moment.
That was my moment because before that I was mentally out, physically in, really, right? Because I was researching that didn't align, but I still was physically in, and it was hard for me to leave because my community, that was keeping me in. When
Mhm.
that situation happened with that elder and he verbally abused my brother and I, and the congregation elders allowed a system like that. They allowed that to happen, really. My own mother allowed it to happen. I knew that I could no longer be physically in, mentally out. I knew I had to be physically out, mentally out, because it just was not a safe space for me, clearly, and
Mhm.
I just no longer felt comfortable there. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel there was just no physical way that I could go to the meeting after that and feel
Yeah.
good or feel
Yeah, I
safe.
remember having similar feelings.
And it
It's
was like
challenging.
really, yeah, it was challenging. It was out of my control. It really felt like I was forced out. I didn't feel like it was my choice. I really felt like that was the last meeting I will ever go to because I feel so uncomfortable. And me going to these meetings will actually lead me to have worse mental health than to be going. So I told my brother that
You
same night.
eventually have to count the cost, you know? It's like,
Yeah,
here we go. Here we go.
exactly. And so that's when I told my brother that was the last meeting I would go to.
So what was the reaction from your brother and family as this starts to unravel?
The reaction was interesting. I told my brother first, and he was recently baptized, so he had only been baptized a couple months.
Mm,
And after that incident, he was like, "Well, I agree with you, and that will be my last meeting too."
love it.
So yeah, so I was really happy about that because I was like, "Oh, thank God he sees it the same way." And he also ended up coming out to me too. And I think that was his reasoning, that he just hadn't told anyone. And so I think that finally was like the final straw. He's like, I'm over this. Like, I'm just going to be my true self. And then I told my sister, who was disfellowshipped at that point, was living with us. I told her, she was already out. And she was like, yeah, I was kind of waiting for you to get to this point. So she was already ready to accept
Yep.
me. And I was like, wow. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. It was just weird, you know? Like, I can't believe that we haven't had a relationship the last 4 or 5 years.
It's
I end up,
tough. It's like if
yeah,
there's some people that are disfellowship, but they're still mentally in. They still believe, they're just out. And then there are other people who are disfellowship that they're just waiting. They're just
yeah, she
waiting
was
for you to
waiting.
like, yeah.
hmm She was waiting. She was out. And then my older sister, I told her as well. And I mentioned this earlier, she was in the ASL congregation. So she started deconstructing herself. And I think a lot of that was because she was in a foreign language congregation in sign language. So she really wasn't getting a lot of that like brainwashing.
Hmm.
So when I told her, "Hey, I don't know what you're gonna do, but I have to be honest. Like, I am leaving. I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. I'm not gonna go to meetings anymore." She also felt the same way, and she told me, "Well, I'm on the same page." But I think that none of us really told each other about it, how we were feeling, because we were all afraid. But we were all on the
Hmm.
same page. We just didn't know. So I got lucky in that sense, right?
Yeah, very
I got
much.
lucky in the sense that all of my siblings were on the same page as me. So when I left, despite not having a community, I at least had my siblings. My mother is still in it. She stayed in it. So that didn't change. But a year later, after leaving, like a year later, my father would end up leaving too.
Mm,
He would also end up leaving.
that's great. There's just
Mhm.
hope for your mom.
Yeah, I don't think
It's
she's going to
it's
leave.
yeah.
She's really is.
It's challenging. I remember having the mindset. My dad was in the 70s when I left, and I remember just like I don't really want to wake him up in his 70s. It's like I don't know. That was my personal decision. If he wakes up on his own, great. Um, but I just didn't really tell him too much about my departing because you just start to look back at all your terrible decisions and mistakes you made and the life lived, and you're like, I have 10 years left. I don't know. Maybe it was the wrong decision, but that's what I chose.
I feel so bad for my father because he was in his late 60s when he woke up. And I can't imagine what that must have been like, but he struggled a lot because of that too. But he woke up, I think the reason was because we woke up. All his kids leaving, waking up kind of snapped him out of it. But it didn't have that effect for my mother. It had the opposite effect actually. So it's interesting to see how different people have a different effect, and she kind of went the opposite way. She got more into it.
So that's awesome to hear. That's so great that you have the majority of your family out. I would like to, if possible, just to transition, unless there's something else that you do want to address, just to kind of your path that you're on now with your advocacy. I can say the word, and just it's just some of your meaning and kind of identity surrounded by some of your projects, goals, schooling.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. It's been 6 years since I originally left. And since then, I had a lot of ups and downs. When I finally decided to get my bachelor's, when I graduated, um, I, well, actually, around the time that I had left, I was being harassed by a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, which is something that people don't talk about. They think when you leave, like, you just leave clean, like a clean break, but I actually was getting harassed by some members. So because of that, I didn't feel comfortable and I decided to disassociate myself. And so my mother stood on business when I decided to get my bachelor's degree. At that point, I had dissociated. She kicked me out when I got my bachelor's. She's like, "Yeah, I don't want you to be here." So I was kicked out of my childhood home. But I obviously figured things out. But I went on to just continue my education. I moved to Portland around that time because being in Phoenix was just too overwhelming for me. The memories, running into past members, the harassment that I went through. I needed a new environment. I moved to Portland. I finished up my bachelor's degree there. And I went into studying communications because to me it felt right. I also didn't really know what I wanted to do because as growing up Jehovah's Witness, you're not really allowed to explore what you want to do in your future, right? So for me, I was still trying to figure that out. And I think communications just really allowed me to get those skills, those communication skills. But I also just feel like had I been allowed to explore more, I would have realized my passion sooner. When I was younger, I always was interested in advocacy, but being a Jehovah's Witness, I was never allowed to explore that. There were so many moments in my life as a young girl where I felt moved by certain things. And for people who don't know about Jehovah's Witnesses, about like their doctrine is they don't believe they believe in being politically neutral. And it's something that they have every right to believe, right? To be politically neutral. They don't want to get involved in politics. But what that means is their members cannot be involved in any political affiliations or advocacy. They also can't vote. And that's a little gray area because the religion tells members that they can vote. It's a personal conscience, like it's your personal decision. But if you look at the consequences of that, if you get involved, voting is basically they see it as a form of not being neutral. So by not being neutral, you can get disfellowshipped. So it's this weird gray area where to me, it's a legal reason because in the United States and in a lot of democratic countries, you cannot, if you tell someone that they cannot vote, right? You cannot be permitted to vote. That is illegal. It goes against your rights as a citizen. Everyone in the United States has the right to vote. That's one of the foundations of the United States. So Jehovah's Witnesses cannot formally tell their members, you cannot vote, and they can get in trouble for that, right? That's against the law. So what they do is they tell the public that it's a personal conscience, a personal decision, but yet they have all the doctrine that tells their members that they should not do that and remain politically neutral. So
Well,
people don't vote.
it's a classic thing in my mind of using kind of the loaded questions or loaded language that they would do is like, should you be voting?
Yeah.
And so it's not them saying you can't vote,
Hmm.
but it's framed around what does your Bible trained conscience tell you? And that's the way
Yeah.
they can kind of get around it and still have it be in their messaging. It's like you can do it, but are you spending your time in the world and worrying about this system of things when you should be worrying about God's government? It's bullshit.
Absolutely. They basically, in order to align with not doing something illegally, they tell you that you can possibly vote, you could technically vote, but do you really want to? And should you? And they make you feel guilty, and they basically tell their members to not do it.
Yeah, and
I've never met a
any
Jehovah's
wit
Witness that voted.
1,000%. Yeah, if anyone did do it, they wouldn't tell anyone.
They wouldn't tell anyone. They'd be shamed
Hmm.
and they'd be terrified.
Yeah.
Can't imagine any Jehovah's Witness voting and feeling good about it and feeling, oh
Going
my
to
gosh,
a
like
ballot box and then putting a sticker on your chest, no
no.
way. If
And
you
you can
did do
get,
it, you'd sneak
yeah,
in there, you wouldn't put the sticker on because you'd fear you'd run into someone and they'd like, "What, did you vote today?"
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you can get disfellowship for being involved in anything political. So you
Mhm.
don't even have the option to even work for an organization. Like it's very strict. You can get disfellowship. And growing up, for me, that was something that didn't really sit well with me because I remember like when I was 8, I think that's when Obama became president. And I remember seeing the news and I was like really moved by it. I was like, wow, like these people are so happy. The first black president. That's a huge historical moment in the United States. And I remember telling my parents how excited. I'm like, wow, this is great. Like, this is awesome. And they basically had a little talk with me and said, hey, that doesn't matter. Like, you shouldn't be that moved by it because Jehovah's kingdom is the only thing that matters. The same thing happened when Obama passed gay rights. Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in gay rights. They don't believe that you should be gay. Yet I felt happy when that happened. That was a contradiction to what I was being taught. I'm like, why do I feel happy for these people? And I was happy, not necessarily that because I was raised to basically not support gay rights. I mean, to not support the LGBT community. I was more happy that they had the right to get married. I wasn't necessarily like, oh, go LGBTQ. I was like, oh, this is good. This is something that they deserve in this country, like democratically wise, right?
Yep.
But I remember like telling that to my parents, and they were like, no, like, why are you even thinking like that? Like, why? You shouldn't even be happy about this law. So growing up, I always had that way of thinking, and I always felt shamed for doing that. And when I was in high school, there was like a protest that was happening. It's called Red for Ed. It happened here in Arizona. It was one of the largest protests in all of Arizona state history. And all of my classmates and my teachers were going to go protest for Red for Ed. And what the protest was is really the teachers wanted higher pay, and they wanted more funding for low income schools, or for schools that weren't getting income or funding for the education. And I agreed with all of that. I was like, wow, I agree with this cause. And I just felt so embarrassed and so ashamed that I couldn't join and support my teachers, because that would be against my religion. And quite literally, being a part of that would cause me to be excommunicated. So that instance was the first time in my life where I realized, oh my God, like, my faith does not allow me to be involved in this. And not only does it not allow me to, but there's severe consequences to it. Terrifying consequences, excommunication. So those were all things that I feel like, had I been allowed to not fear them or suppress that, I probably would have gotten involved in that or been more passionate about that sooner. And maybe I would have studied political science in my undergrad, but because I wasn't allowed to, I studied communications. So when I finally graduated, I never forgot about that. I never forgot about those moments that made me passionate. And I remember I voted for the first time, and that was a really special moment for me, because my whole life as a Jehovah's Witness, I was taught that voting was very black and white. Voting, all it is, oh, it's like you're choosing a man, you're choosing a person, you're putting your faith in men. You're choosing one political candidate over another. But after I had graduated and I started to learn more about it, I realized that everything they told me about voting was wrong. That's not what voting is. When you go vote, most of that stuff is issues in your community when you're voting on the local level, right? A lot of the stuff on the ballot is whether or not you want funding for kids who want school lunches, your roads to get fixed. It's not black and white. It's not, hey, I'm picking, I mean, unless it's like a national election, like the presidency, yeah, it's picking one candidate over the other, but they're not really allowing their members to be a part of this process to benefit their own communities. And I started learning more about voting and how important it is, because a lot of people aren't voting. A lot of minorities don't vote. So that means only a specific demographic is voting. So you're only seeing certain laws being passed or certain things being passed that benefit this small group of people. So I don't know. I'm just really passionate about it. I think voting is really important. I think it's a civic duty, it's a civic right. And it's kind of sad to me that they're not allowed to be in that process, and they're punished by if they are in that process. And I really got more into it when I got one of my first jobs out of college. One of my first jobs was to be a outreach coordinator for a nonprofit. It's a indigenous nonprofit. And I would go out to the reservation, to these communities, these tribal communities, and I would educate them on voting. I would do outreach for voting, and I got to see the really bad side effects and the effects of what it's like for a community to be removed from that process. And really, essentially, what it is that their voices are being taken away. And that's kind of how I see it with Jehovah's Witnesses. They have a voice that they're not even allowed to understand or know. I had a voice at one point when I was a Jehovah's Witness. My voice was silenced. It was taken from me. and I was not allowed to exercise that voice despite wanting to. And I can't help but think how many other young Jehovah's Witnesses, how many other Jehovah's Witnesses had that experience where maybe their thoughts, they had opinions, especially nowadays, what's happening. Sorry, I'm not trying to get too political here, but there's a lot of issues happening in the world, like what's happening in Gaza. Whatever you feel about it, you can have whatever opinion, right? I'm not going to go into what I believe in that, my opinions on that, but it's really difficult to tell a group of people that they should remain politically neutral because nothing really is neutral. We
Hmm.
are humans, we are unbiased. We are moved by different ideas and thoughts, and we have empathy. Telling a group of people that they shouldn't have opinions or thoughts about what's going on in the world, politically or not, is
Yeah.
devastating to your identity, and it's just not realistic.
It's a travesty. It's like, we were constantly taught growing up as Jehovah's Witnesses to be no part of the world. Um, and the reality is if you're alive on this planet, you are a part of the world. And so you have to make a choice like how you want to move forward with that understanding. Um, I personally have a mindset of like I can't carry all of the weight of the world on my shoulder, but you can definitely pick a lane. Be passionate about something. Have time in your life that you can try to put towards helping other people. Um, and so I think it's great when I hear of anyone that wants to use their time to do that. The reality is we are part of this world. We gotta choose our time wisely, knowing that we only have a short amount of time. And it's like you're telling me you're gonna live in an environment where, say, like, I don't know, there's toxic rain and it's happening every day
Mhm.
and people are dying, and you're just like, well, it is what it is, just wait till another day. And it's like, no, you could maybe help fix that problem, you know so people can have a better life. I don't know. I think it's great. So where do you see yourself kind of going down this path with this new trajectory for your life?
Yeah, I'm really after I started doing that, what I was doing for work, I realized this is something that I want to get more involved in. And like I said, it means a lot more to me because I was actively stopped from being a part of that process.
Hmm.
And had I been a Jehovah's Witness longer, right? I left at a young age. I was 19. That's more time that I would have not been able to be involved. And
And there's something there too. Sorry to interrupt.
no, you're fine.
That you were out for a while and you made a public decision also to come back and be visible in
Yeah,
this space.
absolutely. Yeah, and that's exactly where I was. That's a recent thing too. But I I kind of after that job was wanting to go back to school. I wasn't sure exactly if I wanted to get into what I do, like public policy, public administration yet. I was still debating maybe I should go into higher ed because I was really passionate about higher ed because that's another thing that was kind of, you know, not allowed really or like discouraged my upbringing. So I'm passionate about those things, right? Because there were things that once I wasn't really allowed or fully allowed to step into. So I ended up getting a job where I work now. I work for the school for ASU, and um, working for that school, it's like the school public affairs. So that's where I started to learn more about it. And I was like, okay, well, a lot of this stuff is similar to what I was doing at my old job. And I made the decision to go back to school and do my master's of public administration and public policy. And so right now, I'm more focused on getting involved with elections administration, like voting. I'm really passionate about that. So my goal, my future is to obviously continue school, finish up, and most of my coursework, I focus it on that. It's focused on civic engagement, and then I do that for work as well. I help out with some of the centers that do like election processes. I help a lot of the
I
centers
think
do that.
I think it's wonderful. I think there's a possibility too, like education for people like J Dubs coming out. not really understanding anything about politics. I think you have a unique category that you could really help be an
Yeah.
assistance for people with that, because we just never did it. I mean, the first time I voted, I was 40. I don't know, So, so that might be something too that would really
Yeah.
be great coming from someone with your knowledge and experience. Um,
Yeah, I would love to do something like that, and I think a lot of it for XJW specifically is it's just something that they never really were allowed to understand or know about. And even for me as an XJW, for a long time, I didn't really understand what voting really was. I didn't really know the civic processes. There's Jehovah's Witnesses are so removed from that civic engagement. They're not even allowed to do. Are we even allowed to do jury duty? I don't even know if they do jury duty.
from my understanding, you can do jury duty if it doesn't result in someone facing like the death penalty.
Okay, I see. Well, I didn't even know that. See, like I
Yeah,
just feel like they're growing up in that is like you're just so far removed from the process. So I think that there does need to be more education for people who grow up, not even just Jehovah's Witnesses, but grow
yeah,
up in communities that
yeah.
like the tribal communities where they don't have a lot of access to that education. It's
Mhm.
important to know, especially as you are living in a certain where you're living, a lot of the stuff affects you. So it's important to know about these things. But that also that's something that I'm interested in doing and I'm hoping to do as well.
I love it. I love the time we've spent today and just hearing your story and hearing, what you came from and where you're at now. I think it's just really powerful. I'm appreciative of the time that you've given me. I think as we close out, if there's anything we didn't touch on, briefly, I'd love to address. And then, if you want to provide socials, put yourself out there by all means. And then just kind of any closing thoughts.
Yeah, well, my closing thoughts are basically, I just want to thank you for allowing me to be on this platform to share more about myself, share more about my story. There's just so much. I mean, we could be here for the whole day if we wanted to really dive deeply about everything. And I'm just really happy that I had the opportunity just to share that little piece. And I hope that other Gen Z ex Jehovah's Witnesses also find the courage to not give up. That's really what I want to leave with this is not just Gen Z, anyone, but particularly young people. I think that they have so much power, and I'm just so happy to see other young ones leaving it and making a new life for themselves. I have yet to really meet anyone who I knew back then who has left, but I have seen a lot more. Um, I am seeing a lot more younger people, younger folks. I started my TikTok. You can follow me on Giselle.ara. And I just sometimes I'm not really present on there. Sometimes I post when I can. I'm trying to be more present on there, but I've gotten a lot of messages from Gen Z people leaving, and that makes me pretty happy because they have their whole life ahead of them. They deserve to live their life in a meaningful and a beautiful, impactful way, and they deserve to have a chance of a different life that brings them joy. So I just kind of want to encourage and leave off with that note that I hope that more young people have the courage to leave, and if they do leave, I hope that they don't feel alone because there's so many other people like yourself who make communities for people like that and bring a lot of awareness and resources too.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for putting yourself out there. This is no easy task sometimes to tell your story, and I agree with you. It's challenging because it's just a snapshot. I mean, a
Yeah.
couple-hour conversation does not fully encapsulate everything, but I'm hopeful that people enjoyed our conversation. I know time is very valuable, and yeah, you can definitely find us online as well on Instagram, cult.chur.pod, TikTok, all the things. Um, and yeah, we'll definitely make sure when this episode comes out, that we kind of put all your stuff out there. So thanks so much for your time, listeners. Thank you so much for your time as well. And we'll talk with you soon. Thanks for listening to the Culture Podcast. If this conversation meant something to you, please consider following the show, leaving a review, or supporting us at Patreon. You'll find links to all our socials in the show notes. If you'd like to share your story or suggest a guest, email us at cult.chur.pod@gmail.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and stay free.